This next one is called Surface Tension. I should say this is the first time I've read any of my stories. I play music here quite a bit, but I've never really read any of these stories, so forgive me if I'm not doing it as well. So here we are, Surface Tension. The inertia was terrible. It was the way the laws of the universe met with his own habits. Martin Francis was not at all like a sprinter who must run past the finish line and would stop at last 20 meters beyond. He was more like a glass of water, filled past the brim, ready to overrun the glass with only surface tension to prevent a spill. The inertia, the surface tension, and the meniscus. His mother, Mimi, had her own separate inertia. She was in motion and tended to stay that way. Her energy seemed to Martin to come from her unforgivable breasts, which had a way of leading her from place to place. They were, in her own words, her team. Not like teammates, but rather like a team of horses to be hitched up every morning with a complex set of bridles and straps. The two of them stood on a platform while Mimi finished a last cigarette before they boarded a train bound for Florida. Last year they had flown. "Wipe the mud off your face," she said to him, meaning that he ought to smile. This is what she said when she wanted to cheer him up. She flirted with the conductor for a moment as they boarded and wagged her breasts at him. He replied with an uncomfortable smile. Mimi dressed as though she was in Florida all the time, in white and pastel combinations. Martin had never tried to guess how many of these sets she had, but they must number in the hundreds. She was short and hoarse from years of smoking and talking too loudly at bars. Martin was short like her, but quiet. He dressed for most of the year so as not to be noticed, and with some success. When they went to Florida, however, his mother insisted that he bring only his Florida clothes. They were flower-printed or madras shorts and brightly colored t-shirts, all given to him as gifts at Christmas by his mother. When he wore them, they felt like a cheap disguise, like fake eyebrows and a nose. He wore them in the uncomfortable way mannequins have of looking as though someone else has buttoned their pants. There had been the two of them, more or less, since he was in kindergarten. For a year when he was 8, somebody named Ken had come to live with them. There wasn't much for Martin to remember about Ken. As they took their seats, he imagined himself as a prisoner being marched onto a train, destined for some prison camp or other deep in America. The guard, his mother, barked orders such as, "Snap out of it," or "Wipe the mud off your face," or "These are the best years of your life." He was a prisoner in the best years of his life. He would be entering the last year of high school when they returned from a month with his Uncle Gil, who was retired and had a trailer down there. "Maybe you'll meet a girl down in Florida," said Mimi. It was her great shame that Martin had never been on a date. His mother was constantly out on dates on account of her swaggering breasts. Sometimes she would go out with the same guy for a while, and after a few dates, she would have sex with him when she thought Martin was asleep. It wasn't that Martin didn't want to go out on a date. In fact, it was all he could think about. For hours on end, he would practice what they would say if he were on a date with Becky or Lindsay from his class. Usually Becky, though, because she was nice, even though Lindsay was prettier. It didn't matter that he didn't actually know either of them. He would never have an opportunity to talk to them, and even if he did, what would he say? Martin could not see the point of going to Florida in the summer. You were supposed to go in the winter to get away from all the dreariness of March. His mother said they were not going all that way so they could turn around and come right back after a week. They would stay for a month to make it worthwhile. Martin had not seen the engine from the platform, and when they pulled away, he was surprised to find himself traveling backwards. He could see the city blocks and neighborhoods they had passed and watched as they disappeared, obscured by a building or lost around a corner. He could see the bushes and tangles that separated the track from the shabbiness that lined it. The poor neighbors had all tried turning their backs to it, trying in vain to ignore it. If you asked them, they would say, "You get used to it." A couple of kids were playing in one of the yards and looked up when the engine sounded its whistle, but they were back and busy with their Tonkas by the time Martin passed them. Once, in the 5th grade, his phys ed teacher had talked about a strongman who had been on That's Incredible. They had all watched it. The strongman harnessed himself to a rail car and pulled it some ways down a special track that had been set up in the television studio. The teacher had explained that any of them could have kept that rail car moving if they had had a start. It was getting it started that was the difficulty. Martin doubted that this was true, but he liked the idea. He liked the idea that if a strong man could get the rail car rolling and then just pass it off to him, he could pull that rail car into the television studio. Martin had no strong man to get his rail car rolling for him. He imagined himself straining against it until his face was red and the blood pounding in his head threatened to burst from his veins. He heaved and jerked at it without satisfaction as his mother chugged around like the little engine that could, her breasts like twin engines, all the while sounding whistles of encouragement to him. The conductor came around, collected tickets, and laughed off Mamie's easy flirtation. Perhaps this young gentleman would escort you to the dining car, he said, smiling at Martin and moving on to the next berth. Thank you. Where's James? Back there. You want me to keep going, or you want me to go on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I've got one more I can read here, so I don't know. Thank you. Can't remember what. Oh, this one's called "Spring Is in the Air." It was a long way from Holder's office down to his own on the 12th floor. He was waiting, wondering if he should try to look as though he was in the middle of something, or as though he had actually been waiting. He supposed it didn't matter under the circumstances. He arranged the things on his desk. The inbox was full. The outbox was empty and conspicuous. The secretary he shared with 2 other men on this floor had been around while he was at lunch and taken away what was there. He straightened his nameplate and pen set and looked at the family portrait he kept on his desk. He was wearing the same suit he had for the photo. He had known this when he put the suit on in the morning. It was something he always registered in his mind. The suit was navy and prone to wrinkles. It was nearly 2 o'clock and the suit was rather wrinkled as the wrinkles gained depth and complexity in the course of time. His allergies had been bothering him the way they did at this time of year. He had an allergy pill at lunch with his salad. It made him groggy despite its claims, but at least he could breathe. He breathed in and out slowly and deeply. The deep breathing was partly because he had been clogged since he woke, and partly because he had come to hate these meetings with Holder. There was a tension between them. He looked at his watch, he looked at the photo. In it, his hand was on his wife's shoulder, their child was on her lap. His suit was shabbier in real life. The suit had been new in the picture. He looked happy. His wife had her hand on the child's knee, and you could see her wedding ring. He took pride in seeing the ring on his wife's finger. It was a thing he always looked at when he looked at the picture. This was the 3rd time that Holder had come to meet with him in his office. In the previous 4 years, he had always been summoned to Holder's office when he was wanted. It was not unusual that they should need to meet. Otherwise, they might both avoid the awkwardness. The work was fine. It was natural that he should be called upon to explain some aspect of a report or to answer as to why an expense had been necessary. He wondered if he might have a chance at a promotion. Holder arrived with precision timing. He was bronze and gleaming. His suit was new and expensive. His tan was conspicuous among the pallid middle managers of the 12th floor. There was a nearly audible chime when he smiled. He was pressed. "Martingale," he said, "I have just been in with Nash and Wales. They've read the report, and according to them, we've completely missed the point. Have you seen their report on marginalization for increased margins? Very insightful, but completely at odds with ours. We've got to get on board here. Have we got anything with a little pizzazz?" "I don't know about you, but I haven't. Pizzazz isn't really my thing," he said with more than a dash of wither. He had eaten a particularly bad walnut in the salad he had for lunch. He hadn't really tasted because of his allergies. His taste buds caught it like a glimpse. It combined with the allergy pill to dry his mouth. His words passed out, desiccated and wrinkled. Since then, his speech had been tainted with rotten walnut. No, I haven't seen that report. Why should I have? Whoa, slow down, old boy, said Holder. I just thought it might have added some insight to the thing. This is business. He caught the illusion. Yes, this is business, thought Martingale, and smiled. My report has plenty of insight, he said. Perhaps they should read my report. Quite right, Holder acquiesced. I've always said Martingale writes an insightful report. That's why we pay him the big money. Martingale looked down, from Holder to the photo on his desk. He knew he'd been slighted, but in an offhand way for which there was no defense. He looked at his wife, between them on the desk, smiling. It was a fake smile. He remembered the day the picture was taken. The child had been willful and refused to sit still. His wife's patience was worn through. She was embarrassed at the child's behavior in front of the photographer. In the end, she spanked the child, and he sat while she gripped him tightly around the knee and whispered further threats against bad behavior. When the photographer snapped the shot, they all said cheese. He looked at her now, smiling from her place on his desk. The muscles stood out on her arm, tense where she clutched the child. Her jaw was a geometry of sinew. Her eyes had barely softened from the fury that lived just outside the picture. Martingale, are you all right? Asked Holder. The allergy pill, which had carried him away for a moment, was wearing off, and his eyes were starting to water. Allergies, he said. That time of year, said Holder. It's in the air, Martingale was fading. What is? Spring, Martingale implied. Oh yes, said Holder, following cautiously. Spring is in the air. Yes, I guess it is. Thank you. We're going to lose next.